This is the case of Carjen Oviedo, the nurse who everyone thought was a hero, but who was secretly hiding something terrifying beneath her home. A trusted caregiver turned predator, a neighbor turned nightmare. Alongside her are the names of those forever tied to her story: Daniel Ruiz, the teenage boy who vanished; Officer Marla Henson, who led the investigation; and the many families who unknowingly live beside a monster. What you're about to hear is a story of deception, betrayal, and a chilling secret that no one saw coming. Before we dive into this disturbing case, make sure you support this channel by subscribing and staying active. Your engagement helps bring more true crime stories like this to light. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and join me as we uncover the horrifying truth behind the case of Carjen Oviedo. Carjen Oviedo's life looked like something anyone would envy. She had a stable job at the local hospital, a comfortable home on a quiet street, and a reputation as one of the kindest people in the community. Neighbors would often see her leaving early in the morning, in her crisp nurse's uniform, smiling as she waved to those she passed. She was the type of person who always seemed to have time for others, whether it was helping a struggling mother with groceries, checking in on the elderly, or baking for community fundraisers. People often spoke about her as though she was a blessing to the town, a figure who represented stability and care in a world that often felt uncertain. But what no one realized was that the same hands that treated the sick and offered comfort also carried a dark weight, a hidden truth Carjen kept buried beneath layers of charm and normalcy. The hospital where she worked trusted her completely. Patients admired her patience, doctors praised her precision, and her supervisors never once had cause to question her integrity. Her schedule was demanding, but she never complained. Even during long shifts, she kept her energy steady and her demeanor calm. Her presence gave people the impression that she was deeply dependable, the kind of person you could lean on without fear of judgment. Her colleagues sometimes wondered how she managed to stay so composed, but they chalked it up to professionalism. In reality, Carjen's composure was something far darker. It was the product of a carefully built facade, one she had mastered over years of keeping her impulses hidden. On weekends, she was just as admired. She appeared at neighborhood events, often showing up with homemade dishes that were quickly eaten up. Children adored her because she was gentle and attentive, always crouching down to listen to their stories. Parents trusted her implicitly, often leaving their kids in her care without hesitation. Even the local church saw her as a devoted helper, someone who gave her time selflessly. If there was ever a list of the most trusted people in town, Carjen would have been near the top. And yet, behind that trust was a loneliness and obsession that no one could see. Her house reflected the same image she projected: tidy curtains, a garden kept in order, and soft lights that glowed warmly in the evenings. Neighbors thought of her home as inviting, though few had actually been inside. To most, it was simply the residence of a respected nurse, a quiet place where nothing unusual ever happened. But within those walls, she had cultivated a life of strict control, carefully ensuring that no visitor saw beyond the surface. Every gesture, every word, every smile was designed to keep suspicion at bay. And it worked. Carjen Oviedo was untouchable in the eyes of the town, the last person anyone would ever connect to something sinister. The first sign of trouble in the quiet town was subtle, almost too easy to dismiss. At first, it was just pets, dogs that slipped out of backyards and never returned, cats that went missing overnight without a trace. People blamed coyotes or accidents, telling themselves it was part of living near wooded areas. Yet as weeks passed, the unease grew. The disappearances followed no clear pattern, and rumors began circulating at small gatherings and grocery store checkout lines. It was unsettling, but still, no one thought it pointed toward anything more sinister than bad luck. The thought that someone might be behind it never crossed most people's minds, and certainly, nobody considered Carjen Oviedo the trusted nurse and neighbor who continued smiling and lending a hand as though nothing unusual was happening. That fragile sense of safety finally broke when a teenage boy failed to come home one evening. His family reported him missing within hours, sparking a search that pulled in volunteers from across the community. Flyers went up, search parties combed the woods, and the streets filled with worried neighbors looking for clues. Panic spread quickly. This was not a lost pet, but a child, and the stakes were terrifyingly real. Police brought in dogs, questioned anyone who might have seen him, and searched the surrounding areas. Yet there was nothing, no clothing, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The boy's disappearance became the talk of the town, and fear began creeping into daily life. Parents kept their children indoors, locking doors earlier than usual. Strangers became subjects of suspicion. For the first time in years, the town no longer felt safe. Through all of this, Carjen Oviedo remained deeply involved. She comforted neighbors at community meetings, offered tissues to crying mothers, and walked alongside volunteers searching the fields. She even spoke reassuringly to parents, telling them to hold on to hope. Her presence had a calming effect, convincing people that things might still end well. The irony was chilling. The woman who seemed most invested in helping was also the one everyone should have been watching most closely. Her ability to blend in, to act like part of the solution, allowed her to move through the crisis completely unnoticed. Police continued their investigation, but every lead seemed to collapse. Days turned to weeks, and whispers grew louder. Some residents speculated about strangers passing through town, others about human trafficking rings, but never once did anyone connect the case to someone living right beside them. Carjen's spotless image shielded her perfectly. While fear spread through the streets, she remained untouchable, hiding behind the mask of the kind-hearted nurse. No one realized the boy's trail had ended far closer to home than anyone dared imagine. It was nearly half a year after the boy's disappearance when an unexpected discovery shifted the entire investigation. A utility worker had been dispatched to Carjen Oviedo's neighborhood to address a series of power outages affecting several homes. While moving along the edge of her property, he noticed something odd: a patch of overgrown shrubs hiding what appeared to be a wooden structure. At first, he assumed it was an old shed or storage area, but when he looked closer, he realized it was a door camouflaged to blend into the surroundings. The worker, uneasy about what he had found, reported it to authorities. When police arrived, they expected to find little more than an abandoned storage space. Instead, what they uncovered would change everything. Behind the concealed door was a narrow stairwell leading underground. The air was damp, heavy with an unsettling odor. As officers descended, their flashlights illuminated a space that looked nothing like a simple basement. The hidden room was larger than expected, lined with shelves and equipment that immediately raised suspicion. On a table lay personal belongings, shoes, a backpack, and clothing items that matched the descriptions given by the family of the missing boy. Alongside them were journals filled with meticulous notes, written in Carjen's handwriting, documenting disturbing details that investigators struggled to comprehend. The deeper they searched, the worse the picture became. Medical equipment, much of it traced back to the hospital where Carjen worked, filled the room. 4 stands, syringes, and surgical tools were arranged with precision, suggesting the space had been carefully prepared. These were not the tools of a hobbyist or collector. They belonged to someone with professional knowledge, someone who understood how to use them. The journals described procedures and experiments, chilling in their detail and clinical in tone. The combination of evidence left little doubt that this room had been at the center of something far darker than anyone had imagined. For investigators, the discovery was not just shocking, it was personal. Carjen had been involved in the search. Efforts, had stood beside officers as they questioned neighbors, and had pretended to offer comfort while her secret was hidden only steps away from her living room. The betrayal of trust stung as much as the crime itself. Neighbors who once saw her as a source of safety now looked at her home in horror, realizing the missing boy had never been far at all. What unsettled police even more was the question of how long this had been happening. The journals contained dates going back years, suggesting the room had been in use for longer than anyone realized. Each page revealed a calculated mind, one that planned carefully and executed with chilling precision. Carjen Oviedo had not been careless. She had built her secret life with the same steady hands that once healed patients, turning her skill into something monstrous. As investigators pieced together what they had found beneath Carjen Oviedo's home, the disturbing truth about her past began to surface. The journals contained more than just notes about the missing boy. They also hinted at locations and dates that didn't align with anything from her current town. Detectives began reaching out to other jurisdictions, and what they uncovered was chilling. Years earlier, in a different city where Carjen had worked at another hospital, there had been a string of disappearances that were never solved. Families had been left without answers, cases had gone cold, and eventually, the tragedies had been forgotten by most. Carjen had moved away shortly after, taking up a new job and a new life in a town that welcomed her with open arms. It was only now, years later, that the pieces connected. She had carried her methods with her, hiding them behind her reputation as a dedicated nurse. This revelation forced investigators to reconsider everything they thought they knew about her. She wasn't simply someone who had stumbled into criminal behavior. She had been deliberately planning and perfecting it for years. The underground room wasn't the work of someone impulsive. It had been carefully designed, organized, and concealed. She had blended her knowledge of medicine with a meticulous desire for control. What unsettled detectives most was the consistency in her writings. She didn't describe her victims as people but as subjects or projects, reducing them to nameless entries in her notes. That clinical detachment revealed just how far removed she was from empathy, even as she smiled and comforted patients in her day-to-day work. Neighbors who once admired her began recalling small details that suddenly seemed sinister. Some mentioned hearing faint noises late at night. Others remembered how she never invited anyone into her home, despite her friendliness outside of it. A few recalled moments where her expression shifted when she thought no one was watching, a flicker of coldness behind her otherwise warm demeanor. These fragments of memory, insignificant on their own, now formed a pattern that fit too neatly into the larger picture. Carjen had been hiding in plain sight, maintaining her role as the town's trusted caretaker while quietly carrying out her hidden life. The weight of the discovery shook the community. The boy's disappearance had already left families on edge, but realizing that their beloved nurse might have been responsible for more than one case brought terror to an entirely new level. Parents who once trusted her with their children now looked back with horror at how easily she had been given access. Investigators believe she had chosen her environment carefully, surrounding herself with vulnerable people who never saw her. as a threat. Her past had finally caught up with her, and what they were beginning to understand was that the missing boy was never her first victim. He was simply the one whose case finally exposed everything she had worked so hard to hide. When Carjen Oviedo was finally taken into custody, the town was left stunned. The woman who had been trusted to heal and comfort was escorted out of her tidy home in handcuffs, her calm expression betraying no sign of fear or remorse. For many, it was impossible to reconcile the nurse they thought they knew with the person investigators had revealed. The arrest quickly became front-page news, drawing national attention as more details of her secret life surfaced. The underground room, the journals, the equipment, and the evidence of multiple victims painted a picture of a carefully hidden predator who had been operating undetected for years. The betrayal was almost as painful as the crimes themselves. Neighbors, patients, and friends all realized they had been deceived by someone they once admired. During her trial, the courtroom filled with families of the missing, hoping for answers they had been denied for years. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, showing how Carjen had used her medical expertise to carry out acts that most people could hardly imagine. Her journals were read aloud, revealing chillingly detached entries where she cataloged her victims as if they were mere experiments. The more the jury heard, the clearer it became that her actions were not spontaneous, but the result of deliberate planning. She had chosen her victims carefully, concealed her work with precision, and lived a double life without raising suspicion. What struck many was her demeanor during the proceedings. While victims' families wept and shared their pain, Carjen remained composed, her expression unreadable, as though she were watching events unfold from a distance. The verdict was inevitable. Carjen Oviedo was found guilty on multiple counts, her crimes officially linked to both the missing boy and several cold cases from her past. The sentence ensured she would never walk free again, yet even with justice served, the community was left grappling with the unsettling question of how she had gone unnoticed for so long. The same woman who had comforted grieving families had been the cause of their grief all along. The realization left scars on the town that would not heal easily. For many, what made the case unforgettable was not just the horror of her crimes, but the duality of her life. She had walked among them, smiled at them, cared for them, and all the while carried a secret that could have destroyed them at any moment. Carjen Oviedo's story became a cautionary tale about how evil can wear the most convincing mask, hiding behind kindness, professionalism, and trust. In the end, the monstrous secret she had worked so hard to conceal was revealed in full, leaving a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest danger lies not with strangers in the shadows,